Hello friends and family, I have a very quick tutorial for you today. I'm going to show you 4 different ways to ruffle, ruche, or gather your fabric. The first method is hand gathering, and all you'll need is a sewing machine. The second method is using an elastic. And the third and fourth are 2 different ways to gather using ties. The hand gathering method is best used when gathering along a seam. The final gathers will only be held together with one thread, so keep that in mind when using this method. I'll be using squares of fabric and contrasting thread throughout this tutorial. Start by lining up your seam allowance with your needle in the middle position. Then position your needle as far left as you can. Using your longest stitch length, straight stitch along the edge of your fabric, making sure not to backstitch at the beginning or the end. Keep the threads long at the end as well. Starting at the beginning again, line up the seam allowance with the needle in the middle position. Then move your needle as far right as possible. And straight stitch along the edge just like you did before, making sure to leave long threads on either end. You should have 2 parallel lines that look like this. Now we will make our gathers. The easiest way to do this is to place a pin on one end of your stitches. Then wrap your long threads around the pin in a figure 8 style. Now, starting on the other end, take the top 2 threads and gently pull, starting to scrunch the fabric along the seams. Once you gather your fabric to the length you want, place another pin on the end. Then wrap all 4 threads around the pin in a figure 8, just like you did before. This will hold the threads in place so that you can adjust the gathers to sit however you want. Once you are happy with how those look, we will move on to sewing. Carefully take your first pin out and remove the threads without shifting the ruffles. Then, using a regular stitch length, sew down the center of those 2 seams. This should be your seam allowance. Make sure to take your time on this so that you don't shift your gathers. Once you get to the end, carefully take out your pin and gently unravel that figure 8, so you can finish your seam. Starting at one end, clip the extra threads on the outer 2 seams. Then on the other end, use the top threads to gently pull out those seams. And there you go, you have now learned the hand gather method. Gathering with an elastic is probably the easiest way to gather. Taking a 6mm or 1/4 inch wide braided elastic, cut it to about half the length of the area you want to gather. That way when it's stretched out, it will scrunch the fabric like this. You can easily put this along a seam edge, or you can put it anywhere in the middle of the fabric. If you're putting it in the middle of the fabric, it's best to pre-mark the area out using a fabric marker or pencil. Using a pin, mark the middle of your elastic. Then fold your fabric in half and either mark by creating a crease with your nail or placing a pin. Then open your fabric up and pin the middle of the elastic to the middle of your fabric, making sure this is on the wrong side of the fabric, so the inside of your garment. Next, pin the top and bottom of the elastic to the edges of the fabric, making sure to center it over the guideline you made with the marker. Pulling from both ends, stretch it out to see how it will look. Starting from one end, line up the elastic in the center of your presser foot with the needle in the middle position. Place a couple stitches to hold the elastic in place and remove the needle. Backstitch a couple times to really secure that elastic. Then, taking that middle pin, stretch the elastic out and either straight stitch or zigzag stitch all the way down that elastic. Keep stretching it out until you get to the very end of the elastic. Then make sure to backstitch a few times and take that pin out. And then you're done. It's literally that easy. If you're wanting to gather 2 or more layers of fabric together, make sure you pre-stitch the fabric before adding the elastic. This is a fun and easy way to gather a seam using your seam allowance and a tie or cord. Before sewing your seam, measure out the seam allowance and find a tie or cord that will fit within that. I have made my own tie to match the fabric. Then sew your seam like you usually would. Once that's sewn, press it out as flat as possible. Next, you'll want to sew down the edges of that fabric you just pressed out. Once that's done, it should look roughly like this. Then take your tie and thread it all the way through one side, up and over and down through the other side. And that's it, easy peasy. Now you can scrunch up your fabric and tie it off at the end. I like this method because you can customize your gathers whenever you want. This method is pretty similar to the last one, except instead of using a seam, you can put this anywhere on your garment. Lay down your main piece of fabric with the wrong side facing up. Then cut down a thin strip of fabric that's about 3 to 4 times wider than the tie or cord you're using. This will be your casing. With right side facing up, pin your casing in place. Then straight stitch down both sides. Once that's finished, straight stitch down the very center of your casing, making sure to backstitch a couple times on either end. And then you'll have something that looks like this. Maybe your lines will be cleaner than mine, as I did kind of rush this. Now all you have to do is thread your tie up through one side and down the other, just like we did in the previous method. Feel free to keep your ties as long as you want, or make them as short as possible when the fabric is fully stretched out. You could make a knot on each side here and then cut off the rest. Whatever way you choose, you'll still be able to scrunch this up and customize your gathers however you want. Well, I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Obviously, if you have any questions or concerns, definitely ask me in the comment section. You now have so many options to customize and gather basically any part of your garment. Have fun with it and don't be afraid to experiment.